And something I really like about this system, again, like the flavor of this system is spot on. Hello, I'm the Jagged Wizard, and today I'm going to be talking about the Icon playtest update that was released last Thursday. So last week I did a video talking about the narrative system, which largely remains the same, especially in its overall gameplay. There are a couple of minor tweaks to how advancement works for classes, but other than that, it's pretty similar to the system that I played. But combat, they've added quite a few things to it, and so I'm going to be breaking down this update and sharing some of the things that I liked about it and how combat works in general, because I didn't discuss that last week. And again, if you want a little bit of an overview on this sci-fi fantasy world that I'm going to be talking about in Icon, I'll put the video right there and you can watch that. So first, we're going to talk about how combat works overall. Combat in Icon is a completely different system. Again, I'm just going to re-emphasize that. There are two different systems that we're working with here, and in combat system, you're using a d20, and it's going to be very similar to your Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder. Any d20 based system is going to be pretty much just like that, where you're trying to roll it and you're trying to get above whatever the enemy's armor is. Something to note about this is that these armor classes are much lower than they would be in any other game I've ever played, which is something that plays into the theme of this game, that your characters are exceptional. You're expected to be able to hit people regularly. And so the highest AC I think anyone ever has is a 12. Another thing about having lower ACs is that you don't get as many bonuses to hit. It's probably going to be a +1. It's generally just a straight d20 roll, and if you get above it, you succeed. It's required to be played on a tactical grid because most of the abilities are very specific in how they're designed. I'm going to put up some images from the book and kind of show you how some abilities are shaped kind of differently and how the system depends on a tactical grid. Another thing is you can only move in straight lines. There's no diagonal movement except for one of the classes gets that. But other than that, everyone else is just moving up and down, right and left, which is kind of interesting. I honestly didn't mind that very much. I liked how orthogonal movement affected combat and made it very interesting to see what changed about it. Another thing is that you do get a move for free on your turn. It's kind of like what they do in 5e, where you just get to move and then you can do whatever action. In this system, you have 2 actions per turn, and you cannot repeat any actions. So if you used an ability, you can't use that ability twice in one turn. You have to use a different ability or a different action. And so now that we've kind of established how combat works, I'm going to be talking about the 4 different classes and a little bit about them. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. If you want a video on that, please let me know. I'd be happy to. There's some really cool ideas behind these classes, and I would love to spend some time going over them. The classes in this game are designed around the 4 main roles that you need. You have your stalwart, which is your fighter, someone who's going to be dealing a lot of damage, also will have the most defenses against damage and the highest AC. Vagabonds are kind of like rogues, where they have a lot of mobility and can deal a lot of damage, but are very squishy and can die pretty easily if they're not being watched over. Then you have your mendicants, which are your healer types. They do have some pretty cool damage abilities. Then you have your right, which is your something akin to like a sorcerer or wizard. They have a lot of range damage, but are very don't want to be near anyone that can deal damage to them. And so those are your 4 main jobs, is what they're called. Those are your 4 main jobs, and that's how you'll be moving around in combat. As for combat itself, I think it's cool. I don't know if I really enjoyed it very much the first time around. Like, I enjoyed it, but it very much takes some getting used to. It's a very different system from something like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, because I've played both of those and I'm pretty familiar with both of them to some degree or another. It has a very different feel to it, and for me, something I really liked about it is that I felt very powerful. My character was able to summon a meteor every turn. To be able to do that is something that doesn't feel plausible, especially when you've been playing something like Dungeons and Dragons, where it's very powerful abilities are limited in use, whereas very few of the abilities in Icon have a limit of uses. Most of them are just like, it takes 1 action or it takes 2 actions, so it may take your whole turn, but you can do it every turn if you really want to. So that was one thing I really liked about the combat. Another thing about combat, I'm going to talk a little bit about the bestiary at the end. It's not called that. It's called foes. And something I really like about this system, again, like the flavor of this system is spot on. I really like how it builds your characters to be epic and to be powerful. And as part of that with the bestiary is that if you see a creature on the battlefield, it's assumed that you know a general power level, you know like what class they are automatically. Then if you've ever seen that creature before, you know its full stat block, which is really cool. Something I really like about this system. The foes themselves are divided into very similar jobs as the characters, and they're highlighted with the same colors. So I assume that they're pretty comparable. You have your stalwart equivalent, you have your vagabond equivalent, you have your mendicant equivalent, and you have your right equivalent. So with that, I really enjoyed the combat, and I think if I were to play 1 or 2 more sessions with a little bit more combat, I would genuinely really enjoy it and have a much better feel for it. And even after reading through it, I feel like I know the system a lot better than I did when I was playing. It is a bit tricky when coming from something like Pathfinder or D&D, at least from my experience. I don't know if the other people at my table struggled as much. In short, I really enjoyed the combat. And I think once you get into it, it gets a lot easier. Once you have a better understanding of how combat flows, it's really cool. Oh, another thing before I move on from combat, because I just remembered it, I forgot to type it in my notes, is initiative. So initiative essentially works where every group decides a character to go. From what I've gathered, the players always start, so you choose one character from the players to play the first turn. And then the enemies get to pick someone to go. And then the players choose another person, and it just alternates like that until everyone's gone in a round. And then you restart the round with the players choosing someone again. And I really like that. It reminds me to some degree of Time Watch's initiative system. It's slightly different, but it's kind of cool to see that comparison and see something that's not just like a numerical, like, oh, who rolls the highest, which I really liked. That is, it felt much more strategic. You're like, okay, who do we want to go first? And often I ended up going first because I could set traps and they wanted those out first. So that was something really cool about the system that I really enjoyed. Overall, combat I think is good. I think a lot of the changes I've seen make it flow a lot better, but I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of those. A lot of the abilities I think have been a little bit simplified so that they're more cohesive and more leveled. Because from what I gathered, a couple of the people playing with me, they felt like their characters weren't as powerful as the others. And so I think a lot of the nerfs to my character's abilities are an attempt to balance that. And I'm okay with that. It just makes me sad that I don't get the exact same experience. To be fair, I still have the downloaded PDF of the original. I could keep playing it if I wanted. So overall, I think combat is good, and I think the most recent update balanced it a lot so the classes aren't as disproportionately strong, and I'm excited to see that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the end of the book. There's a huge section, I don't know how huge, but there's a huge section on GM tips. And this introduces a lot of mechanics talking about how to run heists, how to run like intrigue, how to run a battle, how to run a bunch of different scenarios. I don't want to talk about any of those individually because they're all based around one core mechanic, and this is something I love about this system. So clocks are something really cool in this game that I'm super excited to talk about, and it's something I love about this system. They're generally used in narrative play, but they represent your degree of success or failure in any given event. Whenever you're performing an action, be it a heist or a trek or a dungeon crawl, you'll have one of these, depending on like how skilled your character is. Essentially, there are going to be 2 clocks where when you succeed at doing something, you're going to fill in one of the sections in the success category, and when you fail something, you're going to do the same but in the failure category. And whichever clock fills up first is the result that you get. And I really like this mechanic because it allows there to be a sense of stakes where you're like, oh, if I keep failing, I'm going to mess this up for my entire party. And I don't want to do that, so I really hope I keep rolling and I may start pushing rolls where I get maybe some consequences, but I get to roll more dice, so I'm more likely to get that 6 that I need to succeed. Clocks, I think it's a really cool mechanic, and I think it's a really way to show that there is success and failure in this. We only used clocks for one thing in the game I played, but it was basically used to keep track of time, and you only had so many actions to prepare for combat, and once you ran out of actions, you ran into the combat. And so that was kind of cool, but I think there's a lot of things that these clocks can be used for, and I am a big fan of this system and this idea. So another thing new to the system from the update that was published last week is items. Basically, there's a lot of camping gear that you can get. That's really what most of it is, and then it just gives you various bonuses throughout the adventuring day. Another thing is, since there are items, you have to have a way to purchase it. And what you get is dust. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's dust from like old tech, from what I've gathered. And you can use this to purchase things and also to upgrade your equipment. Another thing that was introduced as part of the equipment is relics. Relics are items that you get at specific levels and during your progression, and they give you abilities to like reduce damage or to increase your crit ability or various things like that, where you just get like, they can be armor, they can be weapons, they can be whatever you want. They just give you some sort of bonus, some sort of protection or damage bonus, or you can change damage types. It's really cool, and I think it's a really cool system that you get these like super powered weapons just from being an adventurer. And that's really it from what I've gathered. Again, not much. There's some various adjustments to progression, but other than that, there's not much change. The inclusion of items, I think, is a really cool thing. The balancing of combat I liked, and the things they added to make combat feel and flow a little bit better, I really liked. Overall, I like the system. I like the update. There's a lot of changes to various classes. Overall, I think they did a good job of balancing it so that classes aren't overpowered. The inclusion of items and relics, I think, is really cool, and there's a lot of really good storytelling potential with that. My final thoughts on this: I like the system. I think the combat takes a bit of getting used to. I still don't feel like I have a great grasp on it. I could definitely play it. I would not want to run combat at my current level of understanding, but overall the system is really enjoyable. I would highly recommend checking it out. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the new update, and please let me know if you want to get some more icon content, see me dive a little bit deeper into how to build a character, either for narrative or combat play. Or if you have another system you want me to check out, please leave it in the comments below, and I'd love to be able to get to it. Thank you so much for watching the video this far, and have a great day.